In today's video, we're going to talk about Intel and how at one point the words Intel Inside really meant something. But in 2025, does Intel Inside really have an impact at all? Let's talk about it. All right, real quick before we get into the video, sorry, but let's hear a word from today's sponsor. Even I gotta eat. Chances are that if you're upgrading a computer with major parts or you're just building a new computer, you're going to need a legitimate Windows key. And VIP Your CD Key Sales has you covered. And right now the prices are lower than ever and it's simple to buy. You simply go over to their website, choose the Windows software that you want to, put it into your cart, and when you're going to the checkout, you're going to want to enter the code TOT20 and save yourself an additional 25%, making your Windows key not only completely legit, but also really low price. And after a few minutes, you'll get an email and all of your keys will be inside of your inbox. So it's really simple. So if you want to save money and you want a key that you know is guaranteed to work forever, then check out VIP Your CD Key Sales. All right, thank you for putting up with that, guys. So as a kid growing up, Intel wasn't even a name at all. There was Commodore, there was Amiga, there was all these little weird things at Radio Shack. I mean, there were all kinds of weird things out on the market, but Intel, they weren't really anybody in the beginning that made a difference that I saw in the computing world. Now, that changed years later. A few years went by after I got out of high school, and when I moved up to Oregon, it was right around 1994, 1995, and all of a sudden, I started hearing about these new computers coming out by this company called Intel, and all my friends were like, dude, you used to be into computers back when you were in high school. Like, why aren't you like doing computer stuff and messing with it? And I thought, why aren't you doing that, Elric? So, you know what I mean? I felt like I was going full on, and I don't mean that in a bad way or anything, but I just feel like, wow, why wasn't I doing what I really love? So I started buying computers, and Intel was the biggest name on the block. Having Big Blue inside of your computer was what it was. And if you were a hardcore gamer and a computer guy, you shat on AMD. AMD at this point was shite. They sucked balls. Their stuff in the beginning was just absolutely horrible. Not that Intel hasn't had some flops of their own with Celeron and stuff like that, but when AMD first came out with their Duron and all these stuff, the only thing that I ever found interesting is when I figured out how to do this pencil trick using the lead of a pencil to make an Athlon work faster. Overclocking, yada yada, right? Hence when I used to be Doc Overclock on motherboards.org, because overclocking used to be my thing. And back in those days, Intel was the name in town. Nobody even talked about AMD. Like, if somebody wasn't really hardcore into the computer world and you went to talk to them and you were like, oh, AMD, they'd be like, who? I'm serious. There was a time where nobody took AMD really serious whatsoever. They were the underdog. They always had guys that were like, you know, I'm working with the underdog. The chipsets were crap. The motherboards were crap. A lot of times the video cards that like worked with them were crap. And this is, you know, kind of back in the day when there was no such thing as a real 3D card. But it did have this thing called the S3 3D card, which wasn't even a true 3D card. This sucker said it was a 3D card, not to get off subject, and made bucks, but it wasn't even a real 3D card. 3D Effects, now that's a company we'll talk about another time, because that company kicked ass and changed the world as far as I'm concerned. And Brian, if you're watching this video, man, thanks a lot, man, because Brian Burke, who no longer works at NVIDIA, was the very first person to sample me at motherboards.org and get me on my career of doing videos. That's how long our history is. And for those of you who don't know who I am or whatever, I used to run motherboards.org, which was pretty much the very first hardware site. If you don't believe me and you want to go yada, 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 just go look it up and stuff and you'll see how long ago the site actually came out. It came out in BAUD and you know, as times changed, we just built upon it and made it into what it became. At one point, it was one of the biggest sites around. And on that site, I focused a lot on Intel. I reviewed every single chipset, every single CPU, every single motherboard, every single thing that they had to offer for many years. Dan Schneider was my very first contact at Intel. He was a wonderful, wonderful person. A wonderful, wonderful person. He just was. He was a really, really nice guy. He helped me out a lot too and get me launching on my career. There were some other people at Intel too, and they know who they are, and like they helped me a lot. But really, seriously, Intel was my bread and butter in overclocking reviews, video card reviews, everything. All my systems were always high-end, high-end, high-end Intel. But check it out. Here's what really happened. Intel stopped really making better stuff. It's just true. Probably why Francois left the company, because they kind of just stagnated the market. It was just these little tiny leaps and bounds, small leaps and bounds, small leaps and bounds every launch. It would just be a little bit more, something would be a little bit better. There was nothing that was like really absolutely great. I mean, you know, probably from you go to a 4 or 5 year period, then yeah, there'll be a big difference probably in the CPU as they keep changing chipsets and doing all that stuff. But then things changed. Now, AMD, when AMD was just AMD, and their colors were green and black, and there was another company called ATI. All you tech fans know ATI. We loved that company. And I loved a lot of people at that company. And then AMD bought ATI. And that changed the entire game. That was the beginning of it right there. When that happened, things changed. AMD all of a sudden had a very, very, very good video card company to work with. So they started pouring their money for a while in that video card company. And it worked out damn well for them because gamers started to really like AMD video cards. They became very, very, very popular. And then, guess what? AMD started making CPUs. And as their CPUs kept going through evolution after evolution, I'm sorry to say, but I think the high-end AMD chips for gamers are better than the Intel chips nowadays. And if you go talk to anybody these days, nobody cares about Intel inside. Nobody. It doesn't mean anything to anybody anymore. I talk to people who used to be total Intel purebloods, and they don't use Intel anymore. They use AMD. AMD quit sitting on their laurels. They became very competitive. Intel, on the other hand, kept sitting on their hands and not really developing any new great stuff. AMD caught up, kicked their ass, and now the playing field, even though Intel probably still outsells AMD by a wide margin because that's just how the market was, AMD now has a name that is recognized. And the entire point of this video is Intel inside no longer means at all what it once meant. Giants fall. We've all seen it happen. Intel's still alive and kicking, obviously, because they've got billions of dollars. But are they really the best in town anymore? because they're certainly no longer the only game in town. AMD changed that game field forever. I'm Elric. Thank you guys for watching Tech of Tomorrow. I'll see you guys back on here for more tech videos coming up soon. Got some really nice keyboard and mouse stuff coming up. You guys are gonna love it. Peace.